Wow. If I smoked, I'd have a cigarette. It was so good. It was so good. I loved it. We just finished podcast number 2, which was The Space Between Us, on our website, on the Mental Health News Radio Network, and now we're in the afterglow of our.
We're in the.
How was it? What'd you get from that? What shifted for you?
It was a reminder for me of really how we create and co-create our experience every day, every minute. And sort of that's maybe the meta, that's the big picture, I think, on the smaller side of just, my moment to moment. I mean, even the choice for you and I to do this podcast, and I mean, there's so, if we decided to look at it a different way, we could have been like, who are we to do this? And there's so much stuff out there, and like, but we took this leap of faith. And what is part of, I think, the most joyful part of this experience is what we're actually experiencing as we're creating this podcast. And it just feels like, I don't know. I don't know. My words are a little fumbled right now because I'm just in a lot of joy and love and gratitude, and in the remembering that I need reminding of on a daily basis that my life experience is my own to create. Like, it is, I have that possibility. I might not always feel that way, but reminding myself, knowing in the back of my head that like, that is true for me because I have experienced it so many times, then it means I always have that option. And if I feel like, being miserable on a day and blaming the world for my misery, I can do that. And then remember, but it's all, it's back to me. And so when I'm ready to get out of this, don't wait for somebody else out there because that person's not coming. Right. And I can choose something different. And having that ability to choose and knowing it's a choice and having experienced the result of that choice one way or the other brings me a lot of joy. That's freedom to me. That's love. That's possibility. And that makes me excited. At this, midlife point, turning 50 this year, it makes me excited because I struggled a bit this year with feeling like I'm 50. Like, what have I done with my life? I had a lot of judgment this year. I noticed about what I hadn't accomplished and what I hadn't done, and the work I still had left to do. And I was really getting into a place of, what's going forward, and then realizing that. Just in a conversation with you and I and getting a little coaching from you, it's like, wait a minute, sure, there are things that I haven't done, but how do I choose to look at that? How do I choose to experience that? How do I choose to sit in this moment? What am I focusing on? What am I putting energy to? Is it possibility? Is it love? Is it connection? Is it action? Or is it my victim story? Or the stories, right, that I could still have a lot of attachment to, but what's that going to bring me? And just being in that question, having that ability to sit in that question. So a lot came forward for me today.
Well, like how you said, remember, how to remember, and if you put the hyphen under and then member, like remember that to myself. Like, and then if you do remind, I remember seeing somewhere where it was mind, like you remind yourself, like you redo your mind around this. And just like you saying, what have I done? What I still have so much work to do. Like even changing that into an invitation, like just shifting that, what you just came from, what you were trying to recreate, a negative stance that you'd been dealing with this year, coming into 50, into the 5th decade on the planet. And just a mere shift of, like how you said in the podcast, creating the softening. And then we talked about the opening of creating that as an invitation and what it will bring forth. Because just like getting into nursing school, we'll talk about this one time, like the doors didn't just open. The doors blew open for me because I created that invitation. And I didn't even know I was creating an invitation. And I had an awareness and a softening that an inkling. I had an inkling like this could be what I want to do, because this takes all of my innate personality DNA of compassion, and it lets me make money from it, being a nurse and then a nurse anesthetist. So just an inkling of that to remind ourselves into it's all possible, or remind ourselves, or remember it to us, remember that it's an invitation, right? Like you could, like, what what have I done with my life? Let that be the invitation, not the statement.
And even as you say that, it's like, what have I done with my life? As
Right.
opposed to what have I done with my life?
Exactly. And there's the transformation. I mean, I got chills. There's the shift. I mean, we talk about this like, I mean, I don't know how much more perfect our podcast title could be, because we shift constantly, minute by minute, in these conversations like we've done for a half dozen years, and that we do being recorded on video, being recorded for our podcast for the Mental Health News Radio Network. Like, we are constantly shifting, and it's just like this yummy space to be in. And we keep reminding ourselves, and these are things we worked on 20 years ago, but it's more yummy today than it was even back then, because we're in the presence of it.
Absolutely.
And we allow it to be our invitation or our opening, or we allow it to be our ego and screw you, screw that, I'm going to be nada today. There ain't no reminding. I'm going to be next. You get to choose. And that's okay. And that's okay.
And we have, I mean, this is what's so great about our friendship, and what I really would hope that anybody who's watched, that they can find a friend like we've found in each other, find those people, because we have been in each other's space where it's like we just had to be in it. Like sometimes you just have to be in the shit. Sometimes you just got to sit in it. What we've done though then for each other and for ourselves is sort of say, okay, but how long? Like, I'm going to put a time limit on this, because we know that at some point sitting in it and being in that is not going to serve anymore. And when I think about this last year, you know, when I reflect back, there are definitely plenty of moments when I thought, gosh, like I was really doing a lot of negative self-talk. I was really bringing forward, particularly I remember before turning 50 in April, having these, I was really fixated on the fact that both of my parents had had some major illness. My father had had a quintuple bypass heart surgery by this time, and my mom had breast cancer. And all I could do was like visualize that. And I was coming to 50 and I was like waiting, what's the illness I'm going to get? What's the illness? And then I would have this other contradictory thought of like, wait a minute. First of all, you have no DNA markers, so you do have something scientifically like shown that you're not going to get this. Secondly, you're living a very different lifestyle than they do. You have a mindfulness, and you are driving the bus of your life, and you're not experiencing that. So if you want this as like your 2x4 or the train wreck, you can have that. Keep thinking these thoughts. Keep having this intention that you're going to get something, but just know that it was crazy, right? To go back and forth. And I did notice that. And afterwards I was like, man, why was I doing that to myself? Well, once I got through the judgment about that, and as I'm coming to the end of this year, I realized I just needed a lot of pausing.
Yeah.
This was like a bridge for me. This year felt like a bridge between almost like, in a way, it's going to sound crazy, but like my childhood, first 50 years on the planet, and my adulthood, or my immaturity, first 50 years on the planet, and my maturity. I don't know, but it felt like this bridge where I'm coming into an experience of myself in such a way that it was 50 years in the making. Right. But I think I couldn't see it as I was in it, right? We can't see it when we're in it. We need to step out of the experience and the situation. And it's one of my favorite quotes. I can't remember the name of the woman. It's, we don't learn from our experiences, we learn from reflecting. on our experiences. And so we're at the end of this year, I'm in this reflection period. And what I take into the new year, one of the things that I take is when I start feeling that kind of that judgment, that stuckness, when I'm noticing I'm getting into those patterns, just maybe consider that it's time for a pause, that it's time to sit and just be with something that's shifting, as opposed to judging it and getting in the way of learning maybe a little more quickly. I'll learn it eventually, but I could make my life a little easier if I wasn't getting stuck in that judgment for a period of time, and was allowing myself to just feel what I was feeling. Right.
Well, and I love that. I just wrote down expansion and contraction, and that has to be a podcast for us one day. That could be an entire book, which we should read. I wrote that down. But the essence of that, I remember, and last year, toward the first part of the year until maybe July, I would go to work. Remember how I talk? I would go to work and I would come home and get in bed. Like, for 6 months, I think I came home. Now I traveled some and I did other things, and I went to work and I went to the grocery store, washed my hair, brushed my teeth, and I did all the things that I needed to do to make a living, keep my house clean, do things, keep my car clean, whatever that is. But I went to bed. I was in my bed and I was like, am I depressed? I was still sending applications to TEDx Sydney, and I was like, maybe depressed people don't do that. I don't know. But I allowed that time of contraction. And I didn't judge at the beginning. I didn't judge that time of contraction. I needed that respite. I had come through a lot of transition the last 2 years, actually the last 5 years, of a relationship that went away. And I needed that contraction. And I don't think sometimes we allow ourselves the space to contract, because, remember how Ron used to talk about, like, as an empath would go into a mall and they would have to contract their energy or it gets tangled. Remember how he talked about that, and like contracting that energy and pulling ourselves back so that we don't have to be out there all the time. And I'm a big extrovert. You're an extrovert. But I don't have to be on. I mean, I had to be on when I went to work, because from the time I walked in to the time I left, I was talking, doing, being, and putting myself out there under my acronyms and under myself, because I was interacting with my peers, and I loved it. But there were some days I would come home from work and wouldn't even put the radio or a podcast or audio book on, because I needed to contract. Mm-hmm. And I allowed myself that contraction. And I think that we judge those contractions, because only when we can contract and pause, as you say, which you're a master at the pause, which as you were saying that, I was like, I need that in my life. I need that stillness. I need that pause. Like that pause I need. Like I've just coveted that pause. I realized I was coveting your ability to pause. And that is something we need to talk about on a podcast, so that I can shift for me on that, because you are a master at that. And I watch you with that, and I watch how beautifully that becomes a bridge to a lot of things. And it's been my bridge for a lot of things from you and to you. But I think we have to have an allowance for contraction as well. Mm-hmm. Not just, I mean, we say, we talked about it in the podcast, we talked about this in our first podcast, and we talked about this in our interview. The point on the planet is soul for soul's expansion. And sometimes the humanness of contraction has to be there. I mean, we have to have, even sunshine burns if we get too much. We have to have contrast. We have to have expansion, and then we have to have contraction.
I love how you've put that, because I don't hear any judgment there, right? It's like, right. That is, for me, when we talk about our points, our personal points of being on the planet, right? I talk all the time about how I want to shift our experience of conflict, right? As a mediator, like this is, having gone to law school, doing mediation training, communication, studying the way people interact with each other, why we do what we do, that it always comes back to that this resistance to conflict and discomfort and change and transition is what draws me in. And you've just framed for me and for everybody watching how we can take judgment out of natural patterns in life. You know, the seasons, I love this as an example. I can't remember when I heard it. It wasn't my idea. But when someone said, you know, do we get angry when summer comes after spring? Or do the trees get angry because the leaves start falling off because it's winter? Or do they get angry when the buds start growing because it's spring? It's like there's an implied, we don't know, maybe except for people who can speak to trees, and I'm not one of those people, or listen to the bees speaking. But there's a natural order to things, and I think we haven't. Maybe it's because of our industrialized, you know, modernized technology ways that we've lost this kind of natural flow in our lives, this natural acceptance of this expansion and contraction. You know, even right in the wintertime, it's like we're supposed to kind of huddle and get in front of the fire and less movement and more sleep. But I know probably a lot of us, including myself at times, it's like we want to resist that because we feel like we have to keep as busy and active. And then we're in all this resistance and judgment, right?
I don't think we've lost it. I don't think we're awake to it yet. Because I remember, if you remember, that was the first part of 2019 for me until like July. I mean, I sat with you in a bar in April, and you saw how I was then. I mean, I was still traveling and being me, but I was so neutral, right? I was neutral, and that was okay because I couldn't answer what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do, but I was neutral. And I knew there was more work to do, but I was neutral, and I allowed that to be. Like I really got clear on that because I'm like, by God, this is what I want to do, and it's what I'm doing. And if I want to come home after working 12 hours a day and on my day off stay in my bed, then that's what I'm going to do, and it's going to be okay. But also remember, during that pause, as you say, or that contraction, that time of contraction, what happened was you asked that pertinent question to me that we talked about in the interview in April. It shifted the way I thought about my life. And then I launched the invitation. The answer did not come until August or September. And it came in a form that I had no idea it would come in, because I thought it would look like my book. I thought it would look like Toastmasters. I thought it would look like keynote speaking. And now it's taken on this different form, and here we are. But I attribute that to allowing myself to contract and be in my bed and it be okay. And so I love how, I mean, we talked about this yesterday. We talked about expansion. I mean, even nature does not keep expanding. She contracts in order to, like you were talking about the season. So there's so much more to this. Like, I think we're doing another podcast. We're gonna have to pull this down a little bit. I don't think I've got enough to get this on our YouTube channel. We can certainly get it to our website, but I love this. Like, I wrote down expansion, contraction, because you and I, like, you could, and opening the invitation and the way just you speak it, say it, feel it. Just as you said, what am I going to do with my life now? I mean, there's such a difference, right? Like, the invitation is out there. So we need to really regroup and put this on our other 30 podcasts of this. So.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody. We're complete, huh?
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
I love you.
I love you too.
All right. See ya.
Bye.